Good afternoon, students. It's Professor Berger. I hope you're having a good week. I'm coming to you today with a short message about creating your argument and thesis statement for the research paper, and then doing your research and composing your annotated bibliography. So I put together this short video with a PowerPoint to kind of walk you through some research steps and some pre-writing steps in composing your thesis. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. Again, the focus is your annotated bibliography, okay? Doing the research to complete that annotated bib, and then your argument for the research paper, which is your thesis statement. So first, let me adjust my screen. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So first, as you begin your research, it's important to keep the writing prompt for the research paper and your response to that prompt in mind. This is your working thesis for the research paper, okay? So think about the writing prompt I've given you in the assignment sheet for the research paper. Think about how you would respond to that prompt, and you want to kind of craft and develop a working response to the prompt. This response is actually your rough draft of a thesis statement or argument for the research paper. So let's review. For the research paper assignment, you will write an entirely new and original analytical essay, around 2,000 words roughly, or 7 to 8 full pages, not including the works cited page, that presents an argument supported by research concerning the relationship between leadership, advocacy, and justice. So this is the broad topic that I've given you for your research paper. The relationship between leadership, advocacy, and justice. You'll recognize these ideas because we've been reading about them and discussing them all semester. So these are not necessarily new topics. These are topics that we've been working on and thinking about for a while, and you're going to reflect on these topics and revisit them in crafting your thesis. You may revisit previous assignments and papers, but you may not copy and paste or edit any previous sections or essays to be used or dropped into your research paper. If you have an alternative topic you would like to research, it must be approved by me in advance. So if you have an alternative topic, then you need to reach out to me right away. Now is the time to reach out and propose your alternative topic for approval. So a couple things to keep in mind. And I'm just going to, again, adjust our page here. I want you to focus on what's at the bottom of your screen. In thinking about your response and argument, consider the questions below. You might craft your thesis as an answer to the following questions. And these questions come directly from the research paper assignment sheet. So they might look familiar to you if you've already read through the assignment sheet. The first question is, what is the role of leadership and advocacy in bringing about justice? So how does leadership and advocating for others, or advocating for morals, principles, ethics, advocating for others, advocating for the law, or a certain interpretation of the law, how does leadership and advocacy, how do these things bring about justice, right? What is the relationship between them? So if you've been working on these ideas again all semester, we've had different discussions, discussion boards, writing prompts, you've written several papers. Leadership, advocacy, and justice, these are kind of loosely course themes that have been running through the semester. And now I want you to think about what you've learned about these three ideas, these big ideas, okay? Reflect on your reading notes and the discussion boards and everything you've been working on. Secondly, what is the importance or significance of leadership and advocacy in relationship to justice? So once you've got sort of a general answer to the first question, maybe it's a sentence or two, then I want you to follow up by answering what is the importance or significance, right? So first you're defining what you believe, your argument, okay? So this is your opinion, your interpretation of these big ideas, what you think the role is of leadership and advocacy. In other words, how does leadership and advocacy bring about justice in different situations? Think about Antigone, think about Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters with Mrs. Wright, think about Elie Wiesel and Malala's speeches, right? Think about advocating for justice. Think about people taking on leadership roles in these situations. Don't just think about Elie Wiesel and Malala and Antigone and Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters. That's sort of one side. But you can also think about the other side, right? Creon, who's advocating leadership, certainly, as the formal leader. Think about the county attorney and the sheriff, who are the formally recognized leaders in trifles. Think about how Elie Wiesel speaks to leadership in his speech, right? He talks about FDR. He says FDR is a great man, was a great president, but he was a flawed president and therefore a flawed model of leadership. Okay. And think about Malala and how she speaks to leadership and the importance of that in bringing about access to education for all children, especially young girls. So really sort of drill down on those ideas. There are different arguments and different ways of approaching these ideas. Not everybody's going to have the same argument or the same response to this question, and that's okay. That's actually really the way it should be. Everybody brings something different to the literature and the text we've been reading and discussing all semester. So you are empowered to have your own argument about these big ideas. And once you've answered that first question about the role of leadership and advocacy and how leadership and advocacy brings about justice, think about the importance or significance of leadership and advocacy. Think about what's really important about this idea, right? This is kind of like what we call the so what question. Why should a modern reader or why should the audience of your paper care about your argument, okay? So there are a lot of different possible responses to this question. But again, it's your argument. It's your paper. So you need to think about what you think is important. This might come toward the end of your research paper as you begin to wrap it up. Okay, your entire paper is about making your argument and supporting it. And then as you wrap it up and close, you might want to transition into really sort of the significance of everything that you've argued and, put a nice bow on your paper in terms of answering this question. But again, you've got freedom here. You've got freedom in constructing your argument and even in how you unpack that in your research paper. But you want to have a rough idea of your answer to these two questions as you begin your research. So let's keep moving. And I put together a couple of points about doing your research. Right? Use your working thesis, that is your response to those questions, the writing prompt, as a guide while doing research. So first point, reflect on the texts we studied this semester, Antigone, Trifles, and Elie Wiesel and Malala's speeches. So reflect on all the texts. You've already done a lot of work on these topics. So this is not starting over. You're building upon work that you've already done. In reflecting, ask yourself, what did I learn about leadership, advocacy, and justice from each of these texts? What did you learn from these texts about leadership, advocacy, and justice? What did you learn about the relationship between these three ideas? How are they interconnected? In reflecting, this is going to take some time, okay? So just note, you need to pause and take a little bit of time, not days. Obviously, you don't have, This is not a 15-week long semester, right? You have a week for each unit. So take a day, take several hours. It's obviously different for each person, and reflect a little bit. Revisit your notes and papers from these texts as you consider what you have already written and said about these ideas. Next point, don't spend too much time at first though, right? So you don't want to get trapped or caught in the process of just reflecting and analyzing and trying to come up with a perfect response. Done is better than perfect. And I've tried to remind people of this throughout the semester. Getting started is more important than trying to perfect a response at the beginning of the process. Doing research is a process, just like writing a paper, especially an academic paper, is a process. And if you spend all of your time in the beginning, or just you just sort of dig down and try to perfect your initial response, you're never going to get started on the research. You're never going to get started on writing your paper. And that's really counterproductive. So just think about it, come up with sort of a rough idea and answer, and start your research, okay? Done is better than perfect. So don't spend too much time. Record your thoughts in a rough response to the writing prompt. Remember, go back to that first slide, those two questions, the role and the importance of leadership and advocacy. 1 or 2 sentences, and treat it as your working thesis. So I wouldn't do more than a paragraph, maybe just a couple sentences. This needs to be simple and a rough working idea. Now that you have your working thesis, you're ready to begin your research. Okay, so here are some steps in doing your research and preparing to write your annotated bibliography. First point, make sure obviously that you've worked through the module. Pay close attention to the writing prompt for the research paper and the directions for completing your annotated bibliography. So make sure you read those assignment sheets that I've provided closely. Pay attention to them, okay? The annotated bibliography is what you're working on in this unit, doing your research and then composing your annotated bib, which is like a works cited page with annotations, like a paragraph or two for each entry on the works cited page. This is the research that's going to help you write your research paper in the next unit. So the annotated bibliography and the research paper are very connected. They're related. This is the foundation for writing your research paper. You want to do your best on your annotated bib, but again, done is always better than perfect, okay? I don't want people to strive for perfection. I want you to do a thoughtful job, do your best, obviously, reach out to me if you have questions, but just basically get your research done and submit your annotated bib. Okay, so our second point, based on the questions listed in the research paper assignment sheet, those are the questions that I reviewed, craft a working thesis and argument to guide your research while you're working on your annotated bib. Read around in the articles already provided for you. So I provided a number of articles in this unit. Follow the directions in the module for evaluating the sources. So remember that you want to evaluate these articles based on their main argument and kind of the quality of the argument and the evidence provided. Okay, you want to think about the relevance of the arguments and the examples as they relate to your own arguments that you're working on for your research paper. Read around. Don't try to become an expert and keep on rereading each article. Look for sections of information and examples and quotes that relate to your argument that would be useful for your paper. Next, let's see. This is our fourth point, I believe. Find relevant information and examples to support your thesis. You need at least 8 solid and credible scholarly sources. 8 to 10, but at least 8. Most of these sources should be recent academic articles, but some can be professional or scholarly websites, pages, blogs, video lectures, discussions. So most of the sources should be scholarly articles. That's what I've provided. But if you find a website, an academic website that you really like, or an online video debate between academics and scholars talking about our topic, you can use those sources. It's just the majority have to be articles. Based on your personal argument and after reviewing the articles provided, you may need to find additional sources. So after you've reviewed what I've provided, you can use all of the articles I provided. You can use some or none. But again, remember, you need 8. So if you don't have at least 8 credible scholarly articles to use, then you do need to go out and find more sources, okay? Remember the directions and the tutorials that are provided in the module on locating and evaluating sources. You'll need to use the AACC Library's electronic databases, which are available online and for remote research. And if you go out looking for sources, in addition to the AACC electronic databases, you can use Google Scholar. But just remember that if you use the AACC electronic databases, you'll need your student ID or your library card, okay? So while you're doing your research, take detailed notes for each source you plan to use in your research paper. Try to be organized. Make sure you clearly label your notes and research. This will save you time in the long run. So while you're doing research in this unit, take clear notes, label your notes as you go. Remember, at the end of this unit, you're going to compose your annotated bibliography. And then in the following unit, you're going to do your research paper. If your notes are disorganized and they're not clearly labeled, you may have to go back and do a lot of rereading, and it's just a lot of wasted time if you're not organized as you go, okay? So ultimately, being organized and taking good, clear notes right now is going to save you time in the long run and, quite frankly, a lot of headaches. All right, once you have found all of your credible and scholarly sources, remember roughly 8 to 10, follow the directions and examples for composing your annotated bibliography. All of this is available in the unit and the module. I've provided several examples, including in the assignment sheet for the annotated bibliography. So you do want to pay close attention in how to compose that annotated bibliography. It is not a literary analysis. It's not an analytical paper. An annotated bibliography is like an alphabetized catalog of your research. It's like a works cited page, a beefed up works cited page with 1 to 2 paragraphs for each citation, for each entry on that works cited page. Okay, so again, think of your annotated bib as an alphabetical catalog of your research that, again, you're using to help write your research paper in the next unit. Everything's interconnected here, right? The research paper builds on this unit. Email me if you have any questions. As always, I'm happy to help. But do, before you, again, send me an email anytime over anything. It's helpful if you've read the assignment sheets and worked through the module before we, meet up in student conferences and talk. That way, any of my answers or discussion just are more meaningful if you have that context, right? If you have the context of the assignments in the module, then my answers and our discussion in student conferences will just be more productive and more meaningful. So do try to at least work through the module and read over the assignment sheets. But obviously, I don't want people to hold off on reaching out to me. Feel free, even if you haven't completed the module, to certainly shoot me a quick email. I'm always here, guys, happy to help. And I look forward to reading your annotated bibliographies. I look forward to your thoughtful questions. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.